Hi, my name is Bob. Welcome to my New Haven Railroad. The layout's about 24 by 32 feet. It's fully scenic at this point. It also has a staging yard that goes about another 20 odd feet into an adjacent room. All of the layout generally is a single track point to point with passing sidings. All of the sidings are signaled, controlled by a central dispatcher. There are 3 walk-around throttles that run trains on the main line, and then there's 4 separate local cabs that operate the various yards and branch lines. It's a standard DC system. I have not converted everything to DCC yet. I'm actually quite happy with the DC system the way it works. The layout's large enough that the blocks are staggered enough that it doesn't horribly impede the operation of the layout. There's one main dispatcher panel that controls all the mainline switches. There's separate panels for the major yards and the staging area. And the way it's laid out is the dispatcher will throw switches in front of the train. The signal will turn red, and in theory, the train stops. I say in theory because in practice, sometimes that doesn't work either. But it's actually a pretty good operating combination with people following trains and the dispatcher controlling the train routes as you go along. If every position is occupied and all the throttles are occupied, at least it takes a minimum of 8 people to run it. We think that comfortably we've been running operating sessions now with between 10 and 12 people, and I don't think many people are bored or standing around. I've always been partial to the New Haven Railroad. My dad was a conductor on the airline for years and years, and then he was the train master in New Haven and Cedar Hill. So I kind of grew up with the New Haven Railroad, and then its successors, the Penn Central and then Conrail. I worked on the railroad during college as a Gandy dancer. There was a saying on the railroad that everything can be done by hand, and I learned it using a pick and a shovel and pry bars and everything else. But it was good honest work, and it made you want to go back to school. There's 2 main yards on the layout. One is the terminus of most of the trains. Another one is a yard that we dispatch various local freights and make drops on. And then we have a third, I'll say, or a separate railroad or branch line on the railroad. It's purely a branch line to serve a quarry, Trap Rock Quarry, and it's been inspired by the Branford Steam Railroad, which is actually a short line that runs about 15-20 miles from here, and it's only about 8 or 9 miles long. When I was a kid, I was 14, we drove our bikes from where I lived to Branford, and we slept on a kid's boat for 3 nights. On the way back, we drove right by the quarry on the bikes, and we actually talked our way onto the engine. And that's what inspired that branch line, is that I remember being in that 44 tonner and hugging the hills along Route 80 and it barely making it back up the grade with the empties. So that's why the branch line was built with tight curves and on the side of a mountain, so to speak. Well, we built the house in 1998. We actually moved in July. And I started building the layout in October. My son at the time was about 14 or 15 years old. He was losing interest in railroading pretty fast and interest in a whole bunch of other things. So I felt rushed. So the construction went along fairly quickly because I felt compelled to get trains moving. And probably within the first 1.5 years or 2 years, we had trains moving on a lot of plywood around the layout. If you read all the articles about the way you're supposed to do things, I didn't do any of them. I didn't have a track plan. I didn't know exactly where everything was going to go. I used the used lumber from the house that was left over when we built it. And the further you go around the layout, the worse the lumber got. It actually got to the point where I was using the old concrete forms. It's sturdy. It's definitely sturdy. Connecticut has a lot of trees, so this layout has a lot of trees. I believe in very simple and straightforward and not messy techniques, and inexpensive. So most of the scenery here is plain old cardboard webbing with brown grocery bags with drywall plaster on it and then pushed onto it. And then when that didn't turn out to be sturdy enough, I would reinforce that with plaster. But because it's all covered with trees, you know, it really served the purpose well. The trees, most of the trees on the layout are simple white polyfiber painted with black spray paint and then with various ground foam on top of it. I think the effect turned out fairly well when you look around. There's a lot of rock castings that I've gotten pretty good at, is mixed in with the trees, and I've been starting to put in a lot more detailed trees in front of the polyfiber forests. I think that is a nice effect. There are several rivers and bridge scenes on the layout that I thought turned out fairly well, although they're not extremely detailed. They really, I think, catch the effect of the Connecticut topography. I think what I've got represented now in rolling stock is virtually most every piece of equipment New Haven had. Diesels we're talking about, and most of the paint schemes that those diesels were in. A lot of it's custom painted. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they just didn't have the variety of New Haven equipment that's out there today. So what happens is you'll wind up painting 3 RS3s, and then Atlas will come out with them pre-painted, and you look at them and you go, these are pretty nice. Next thing you know, you have 6 of them. And that's how the engine pool grew over time. But I'm pretty happy with the way it's turned out. You know, I'm pretty happy with the stuff I painted years ago. But now, like I said, it's being replaced by much more quality equipment, both in the detail of the models and the paint schemes. One of the things I never counted on when I built this was how much fun it was to have people over and to share it with other people. And I'm really happy everybody took the opportunity to watch it and to see the layout. Thanks for visiting.